The betrayal of 1915. The Armenians who separate the Transcaucasian and Azerbaijani Tatars from the Turks of Asia Minor are a wedge driven into the body of the Turkic nation. We cannot allow this wedge to be removed and a single Muslim community looking on us as enemies to emerge in its stead. Armenian historian Kirakosyan. After the start of World War I, Armenian churches and chauvinist organizations began a struggle to establish an independent Armenian state. Along with spying on the political and military situation of the Ottoman state, the Armenians who were immobilized into the Ottoman army deserted with their weapons and joined the Russian troops. With the announcement of mobilization when World War I began, a great number of Armenians living on the territory of the Ottoman state defected to Russia and some to Britain and France. Armenian Dashnaks used all their power to enter the war against the Ottomans. Thus, a new front, the Armenian Front, emerged, fighting the Ottoman army. Lalayan wrote that the Dashnaks too were a lackey of Russian military feudal imperialism, deceiving workers with such slogans as "Liberate our brothers living in Turkey" and so on. The Dashnaks too set up voluntary Armenian detachments during the imperialist massacre on 1914-1918. Through their body called the Armenian National Council, filled the ranks of the tourist army in the Caucasus and turned workers and peasants into soldiers sent by the exploiting class to carry out the massacre in order to secure the interests of terrorism, British, French and Armenian imperialism. The enemy forces received extremely important reconnaissance information about the situation on and behind the Ottoman front and active assistance from the Armenians. Later, the first Prime Minister of the Independent Republic of Armenia and enemy of Turks, Kachazmuni, admitted this in the Burkesh Congress. In the early autumn of 1914, when Turkey had not yet entered the war, revolutionary Armenian gangs were set up in the Caucasus with great effort. Contrary to the decision adopted at the General Congress in Erzurum several weeks earlier, the Armenian Revolutionary Federation Dashnakstun was actively involved in the organization of these gangs and in their activity against Turkey. We lost our ability to judge the truth and got carried away. It must be noted that though the author's book, The Armenian Revolutionary Federation Dashnakstun, has nothing to do anymore, was first published in Armenian in Vienna in 1923. Like many other books, Armenians have removed this book from world libraries. However, an exact copy of this, published in English, is now on the market. Another Armenian author, Papazian, described this event in the following way in his book entitled False Patriotism. When World War I first began in Europe, the Turks made a special effort to side with Germany. At the General Dashnak Congress held in August 1914, young Turks urged them to implement the previous 1907 agreement and provoke the Caucasus Armenians into rising up against Russia. The Dashnaks rejected this and said that as loyal citizens they would support Turkey if a war broke out between Russia and Turkey. They said they would not be responsible for the Russian Armenians. However, as soon as Turkey entered the war, the heads of the Dashnaks' Turkish branch forgot their promise to remain loyal to Turkey, established their activities according to the interests of the Russian state, and forgot the dangers that the war would pose to Turkish Armenians. They became careless, forgot about the decisions of the Erzurum Congress, and invited volunteers to fight the Turks on the Caucasus front. This time, Armenian bandit detachments launched an offensive along the Ottoman border. Not only Armenians from Turkey and Russia, but also from Iran, Romania, Italy, Britain, and America set up units of volunteers and arrived at the Caucasus front. At this moment, the Armenian committee sent the following instruction to the branches of Ottoman territory: if the Russian army advances from the border and the Ottoman soldiers retreat, all available means will be used to raise a revolt everywhere, and the Ottoman army will be caught in the crossfire. Buildings and official areas will be destroyed by bombs set on fire, and the power of the state will be taken from inside. On the contrary, if the Ottoman army advances, the Armenian soldiers will seek asylum in Russia with their weapons and will set up guerrilla detachments deserting their military unit. Western states, first Russia and Britain, France and America, gave promises to the Armenian committees, instigated and armed them, and provoked them into attacking the Ottoman state. The Catholic cause of Ahmedin had declared Tsar Nicholas II of Russia a patron of Armenians. In his address to the Armenians, the Russian Tsar said the following: Armenians, the whole population of Great Russia Russia from the east to the west accepted your invitation with great respect. Armenians, the time has come for you to attain liberty after 5 centuries of tyranny, after which many of you were and still are oppressed. The Russians remember their Armenian children with a great feeling of pride. The Lazarevs, the Malakovs, and the other Armenians have been fighting together with the Slavic brothers for the development of their homeland. For me, your centuries-long loyalty is evident that on this great day you will fulfill all your duties with unbreakable faith and resolve, and make efforts to ensure that our true fight and weapons achieve a decisive victory. Armenians, under the terrorist government, you will join your blood brothers and finally attain liberty and the benefits of justice. Following these statements by the Tsars, some Armenians joined the Russian army, which was fighting the Turks, while many others sold their property, voluntarily joined the regiment, and participated in the genocide against the civilian Turkish population. Since they knew the region very well, they guided the Russians and carried out provocations. It's a fact that from the early stages of the war, most of the Ottoman soldiers who were returning home, wounded and maimed, were killed by Armenian militants on the way. At this time, the Istanbul Patriarchate was engaged in espionage through the Italian embassy, using encodic response methods, although other priests had promised that the Armenians would remain loyal to the government and would not keep weapons. More than 5,000 weapons, about 300 bombs, 40 kilograms of fuses, 200 packs of dynamite, and 5,000 dynamite charges were found in the city, while weapons, arsenals, and 2 dervish outfits were seized in the Arapkir church. In many places, the Turkish soldiers who were sent to check Armenian churches were fired at. During the war, the Russian government rendered comprehensive assistance to the Ottoman Armenians. In this regard, in February 1915, a military representative made the following statement at the National Congress of the Deshnikstein Party in Tiflis. As it known, at the beginning of the war, the Russian government allocated 242,900 rubles at army to train Turkish Armenians and to raise revolts inside the country during the war. Our voluntary detachments were forced to break the chain of the Turkish army and join the rebels, create anarchy on and beyond the front, and if possible among the enemy, and ensure that the Russian army advances and takes control of Turkish Armenia. The Russian government gave Armenian politicians permission to freely discuss their issues and raise their concern, provided that they keep their promise and raise rewards in Turkish Armenia when necessary. However, according to the secret agreements that were reached, the territories that were promised to the Armenians were divided between these 3 states. According to this agreement, the land going through western Terp zone from the Black Sea coast territories around Erzurum, Van, Bitlis, Mush, and Tir were handed over to Russia, while territories around Çukurova, Harput, and Sivas were given to France. At this time, the former foreign minister of the Ottoman state, Gabriel Noradurand, and Boğaz Nubar were holding meetings in European capitals in order to make the dream of an independent Armenia come true. On the other hand, Russia's two-faced policy toward the Ottoman Armenians and its intention to use the Armenians as bait is proved by the idea below as well. When the Russian army occupied Erzurum in early 1916, the Russian command used the following expression in its order: "The Armenians have no right to settle in Erzurum." Armenian author Boryan Oplin spoke about when Russia's police accused the Armenian politicians of daydreaming. He wrote, "It's clear that Armenia is important to Russia. The politicians of the great empire have repeatedly said this. The empire's interest is not to establish an independent Armenia, but to turn it into a Russian colony and establish a Kazakhstan." Armenian revolutionary realized this and did not want to clarify this. What sort of independence is Armenia getting if Russia gets access to Iran, the Euphrates, and the Tigris, and becomes a ruler of Asia Minor? Trabzon and Erzurum are on this path. The Russian Bergossia needs these regions more than the Armenians. This idea of Boryan was also accepted and confirmed by British diplomats who actively participated in the Anatolia development and saw for themselves the bloody events that happened there. What they say showed that the Russians never had any intention of giving to the Armenians the Ottoman land they claimed. A spokesman for the British Foreign Office, MacDonald, reported that when the war started, Russian leaders actively used the Armenian terrorists. He said that the Russians made effective use of the Dashnik Society for secret services in Turkey. At the same time, Armenians were used against Turks in Asia Minor and in order to create chaos. As soon as the World War first began, the two Armenians appealed to the authorities to set up a special regiment after the announcement of mobilization. However, their wish was rejected as it aroused suspicions. After that, Armenian militants started carrying out massacres in neighboring villages. A meeting held in the house of Hunchak committee leader Ipanas Chakrioglu in Zeytun in August 1914 recommended creating obstacles to mobilization by provoking revolt until the occupation of Maras. The British are expected to reach Iskenderun, supporting British operations, seizing gendarmerie arms, deporting the armory, killing Kaymakam's district heads and other government officials and their families, and cutting telegraph lines. Thus, about 800 Armenian militants started operations cutting the telegraph line of Maras, attacking army barracks and government offices, and then escaped and took refuge at the Teka monastery. As a result, Gendarmerie Commander Mayor Suleiman and other 25 gendarmes were killed and 34 were wounded. However, Armenian gangs killed many Muslims in various parts of Maras. It's very interesting that at the same time as the announcement of mobilization in the Ottoman state, revolts began on the orders of the Hinchak and Dashnik committee leaders in areas where Armenian militants had finished organizing and arming themselves. The Muslim population and soldiers were killed in Kayseri by supplying electricity to power lines secretly installed in various places. In an accident, the house of Armenian bomber work who came from America and set up bomb workshops, all the bombs detonated. As a result, this workshop and a great number of weapons and munitions hidden in the house were seized. From the early stages of the war, Armenian volunteers from Russia deliberately joined the Ottoman army in Tbilisi and in Bitlis, and then deserted their weapons and started genocide against the civilian Turkish population. The Ottoman Turkish nation was left in an extremely difficult situation. On the one hand, the Ottoman army was under attack from the rear, and on the other, since the male population in the country had been mobilized, Turkish women, girls, children, and old people were massacred and tortured by Armenian militants. From January 1915, the Armenian militants tipped up their anti-Turkish activity and started cutting off the supply routes and telegraph lines of the Ottoman army, which was fighting the Russians in the east and allied forces in the west as Çanakkale, and killing Ottoman soldiers, officers, and gendarmes who returned from the front line. This is clearly shown in a telegram that the Bitlis governor sent to the Interior Minister on 21 February 1915. According to the American author Samuel Williams, the Armenians brought the weapons to Van Bitlis, Kayseri, Sivas, Kayseri, and Diyarbakir and hid them in their churches and schools. After that, the Armenian Turks, who were mainly soldiers who had deserted the Ottoman army, attacked the unarmed Muslim peasants and started killing them. In order to organize armed revolts in all territory, Armenians started organizing themselves very rapidly. All this goes to show that the Armenian Dashnaks were carrying out deliberate and systematic preparations for the genocide of the Turkish population. According to foreign sources, in the middle of February 1915, the Armenian Dashnak terrorist organization set up military headquarters comprised of 30 people. This terrorist military command was headed by the priest of an Armenian church in Karahisar. On 20 February, an Ottoman military unit was attacked by terrorists who were spirited away by Armenian religious figures at the Iraq monastery. As was the case in Bitlis, the organization and financing of the fight of armed Armenian detachments in Van, Erzurum, Trabzon, Adana, Diyarbakir, and surrounding provinces and districts was carried out by Armenian priests who received instructions mainly from the Patriarchate and Ishmeddin. Armenian militants often put on Ottoman uniforms and killed Muslims. After that, the Armenians made a fuss saying Muslims are killing us, describing the government's attitude to the Armenian subversive and sabotage activities. And in this period, American author Samuel Williams wrote that in order to put an end to the subversive activities of Armenians, the Ottoman government told the Patriarchate to the Armenian Church that if the Armenians do not have the terrorist attacks they are carrying out behind the back of the army, the Turkish government will have to take decisive measures because of this trail that restricts the military capability of the Turkish army in fighting the Russians. The Armenian Patriarch and the Armenian leaders assessed this request as a sign of weakness and increased their attacks behind the Ottoman lines of defense. The genocide of Muslims in Turkey was carried out under the direct leadership of Armenian priests. Even among the leaders of the Van regional committee of the Dashnak Student Party, there were Armenians named Ishkhan and Aran who were sentenced to death by the Russian authorities for committing crimes in the Caucasian Karabakh. As soon as mobilization was declared in the Ottoman state, the Armenian committee, which had completed their internal preparations, started military operations at the vanguard force of the Russian army together with detachments of Armenian volunteers in the Caucasus. The committee's Ratman and Mush started operations with 300 or 400 strong battalions set up by Adrenik of Erzurum, who was noted for his anti-Muslim activities, Hamazaz of Van and other Armenian leaders in order to facilitate the advance of the Russian army and deal a blow to the Ottoman army from from the rear. The Dashniks killed even the Armenians who did not support them. American author Williams wrote that the behavior of the Armenians allies in the Ottoman Empire evoked a feeling of hatred towards the whole Russian army. The Russians made thousands of reports on the genocide of Muslim Turks in all the places invaded by Armenian troops. The Armenians carried out the genocide in cold blood and with the consent of their own officers. Yeah, these acts of genocide happened on a large scale. Yeah. Not only these Armenian militants carried out massacres, they also destroyed the government agencies, looted banks, and destroyed postal and telegraph lines, trying to undermine the foundations of the state. On 7 April 1915, people and wounded Turkish soldiers who could not withstand attacks by thousands of Armenians who encircled the town went took refuge inside the castle. The Armenians prevented aid from being delivered to the city. The Armenians exerting pressure on the castle by means of the most up-to-date Russian weapons and bombs which they had secretly brought in haystacks from Trebizond. After 10 April, Armenian bandit gangs in surrounding areas arrived in the region and totally encircled the city. Their number was more than 10,000. American historian Williams wrote that in 1915 Armenian bandit groups took control of the Ottoman city and wiped almost the whole population until the Russians entered the city on 31st May. The author went on to say that the Armenians immediately took control when it started setting fire to Muslim-populated parts of the city and killing captured Muslims. The Armenians who launched an offensive in all of eastern Anatolia used the same tactics. Small Muslim villages were also attacked. The Muslims were forced to take anything they could and ran away. On right outside the villages, other Armenians were waiting to rob and kill them and rape their women. The Armenians who took the city and massacred the Muslims until the end of May established a provisional government and did not recognize the Turks' right to life. After deep research into the events of that period and archival documents, American historians drew the conclusion. The Caucasus army of Russia launched an offensive and was joined by a great number of Armenian volunteers. On 14 May, they reached Van and exterminated the local Muslim population on mass scale in the next 2 days. An Armenian government protected by the Russian was created in Van. Professor McCarthy wrote that in the short period of Armenian rule, events continued in a way that was quite common for those days. The killings of unarmed Muslim villagers, the kidnapping of people who were never seen again, the devastation of Muslim bazaars, the neighborhoods and villages, and robberies and rape everywhere. After cleansing the whole territory of the Muslim population, the Armenians opened the gates of the city to the Russian army. On 18 May 1915, turning called second thanks the Armenian population of Van for its loyalty. Arem Manukyan was appointed in Russian government the governor in Van. The author then wrote, not to create their own autonomous Armenian province, the Armenian revolutionaries had no choice but to exterminate the Muslims in order to turn the Armenian minority into a majority. To this end, they used every opportunity and Russian aid. After the Russians took Erzurum, the peaceful population faced the most terrible extermination and humiliation in the whole world. More than 1 million Muslim villagers were forced to leave their homes and run away. Thousands of Muslims who followed the Ottoman army which retreated to Erzincan were brutally cut into pieces by Armenians. After that, the Russians occupied the city. After the occupation of Van, the Armenians revolted spread to surrounding areas at the instigation of the Russians. Armenians themselves and other Western sources also acknowledged the atrocities committed by Armenians in Van. Raphael de Nogales wrote, after the governor went of that bay left Van, we found out that it was taken over by Armenians who massacred all Muslim old men, women and children. Such a mean action has never been seen in other parts of the world. This situation reminded me of one incident in Van. At first, and some of my officers were waiting for artillery fire, a Muslim woman was hanging clothes on the roof of a nearby house. On seeing this, the Armenians opened fire. They riddled the body of this old woman with bullets. The Armenians enjoyed killing such poor people. The Turks' human behavior in response to these atrocities incident is praised. The author described it in the following way. On 29 April 1915, we saw 3 Turkish soldiers near the building of the command. Without eating anything themselves, they were feeding an Armenian who had spent 9 days in a nearby well. This Armenian said that he refused to join an assassination attempt on the governor of Van and hid in the well in order to escape the persecution of these companies. His friends were looking for him in order to kill him. After killing this Armenian, they took him to hospital. He spent several days receiving treatment in hospital. After the occupation when Armenian bands around Mush expand their operations and the massacre of Turks. 7,000 Armenians were armed and sent to villages to exterminate the civilian Turkish population here. Armenians who had reached the age of military service also joined bandit groups. For example, Turkish soldiers who sent to Sassoon to recruit soldiers who were killed by Armenian militants. The Armenians carried out unprecedented atrocities in Mush. They raped Turkish women and girls whose bread they had been eating for a long time, and they killed everyone. Many influential Muslim figures in Mush were beheaded like sheep. They stuck horseshoes to the heels of Turks and threw them into lakes. They cut the tendons between the shins and feet of some people so that they could not walk. Civilian history never witnessed such a disaster. The Muslims who were first to move to central parts of Anatolia were also attacked by Armenians. They poured oil on ill people, children, and old women at the Tekka monastery and set them on fire. They raped young girls, cut off their breasts, and executed them. The Armenian barbarians cut off the breast of a Turkish mother and put it into the mouth of a wounded baby lying in the street. A religious figure named Sheikh Abdul Ghaffar Effendi died from terrible pain as they skinned his head. In Diyarbakir, the Armenian minority also started the war. It became unbreathable and insulted Muslims in the city and tried to prevent the gendarmerie and police from doing their job. As was the case in other provinces in Diyarbakir, the Armenians had also completed their organization and armament even the smallest villages. As was the case in the regions here, Armenians also hid most of their weapons and munitions in church basements built in Greece. It's interesting that as soon as the war started in Erzurum, the British, German and French consuls left the region, but their Armenian translators and other police continued their work. It must be noted that as soon as mobilization was declared and the Ottoman state, Muslims rushed to recruitment centers to join the army while Armenians hid in their homes or in churches. On an instruction from the Armenian Patriarchate, Armenian Church took the 43 Ottoman liras from those who did not want to serve in the army, spent all the money themselves, passed them off amongst of Armenian churches or of decrepit buildings, which they passed off as churches and stopped from being drafted into the army. A number of Armenians were partially or totally exempted from taxes by presenting themselves as representatives of the church or by getting dual citizenship from foreign consulates. 75 Erzincan Armenians deserted with the weapons they had received from the Ottoman army and defected to the Russian army. Armenian priests had gone even further than the leaders of Armenian gangs in preparing rewards and attempts on the lives of Muslims, gendarmes, and soldiers. For example, a priest named Snapil in the village of Yaichi in Karahisar abandoned his religious duties and started activities against Muslims. On the pretext of collecting membership fees to the Patriarchate, went around villages in November 1914, marshaled the Armenians and said in his address to them, "The Ottomans have started a war which they will lose. Sometime later, the Russians will enter Erzurum and will come here. The Russians will destroy the army at the front and we from the rear. It's time for you to use the weapons that have been given to you. You hesitated to accept those weapons before. Today you will understand that these weapons are not a bad tool in our hands. We will also worship those who put their own lives at risk to distribute weapons." In the first few months of the war, Armenian gangs destroyed all the villages from Trabzon to Erzincan, filled mosques with sewage, chopped down fruit trees, and killed wells with the bodies of killed Muslims and scattered chopped hands and feet and dismembered bodies in ruined houses and gardens. An increasing number of Armenians had been arrested for various crimes and had later amnested were joining bandit detachments again. At the instigation of the British and the Russians, the Armenians had collected enough food for 18 years and around Urfa. The atrocious Armenians turned the orphanage established by American missionaries in Urfa into their headquarters. Together with the missionaries, they put up armed resistance to İncomers. Though some of the Armenian militants made their gateway, there were 8 foreign nationals among those arrested. The American missionary maliciously committed suicide. When the Russian attacked the Ottoman state from the east and British and French attacked it from the west, treacherous Armenians who started operations in east and west in Anatolia raised reward against the Ottoman population, and soldiers killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people and ruined a number of cities, settlements, and villages. But the Ottoman state did not execute them like many other states would have done in a time a war and simply remove the Armenians from the conflict zone, resettle them to other parts of the country. On the one hand, Armenian members of parliament and other officials, the patriarchate, representatives of the church, priests, and the officials of foreign consulates, covertly directed anti-Turkish and anti-Muslim activities. On the other hand, committee members and their bandit detachments inside the country, voluntary guidance abroad, teachers, priests, street and industrial workers, and a great number of Armenians started implementing this policy. Armenian authors Papazin and Turabian noted that the following points are informed by the basis of the instructions disturbed by the Dashnik leaders in villages. No matter who he is, every Armenian should arm himself, even by selling the most important of his major possessions. Armenians called up to take up arms after the announcement of mobilization will not give in to this call and will prevent people around, including Muslims, from joining the army. Armenian soldiers drafted into the army must desert from the army at any price and join Armenian gangs or voluntary units. As soon as the Russian army crossed the border, deserters and gangs will join the Russian army and take the Ottoman army together. By cutting off supply routes and telegraph lines, they will destroy the supplies and reconnaissance of the Ottoman army. It's necessary to kill all Muslims above the age of 2 everywhere and at first opportunity of the front line, whereas during the event they often killed children below the age of 2 unborn babies. They will seize or set fire to and destroy the food and property of the Muslim people. They will set fire to the houses, crops, churches, and charitable organizations, which they will leave and launch a campaign that these actions have been done by Muslims. They will deliberately provoke official government circles and ambush and kill Ottoman officers and gendarmes. They will kill wounded Ottoman soldiers returning from the front line. They will raise rewards in cities, settlements, and villages. They will demoralize Muslim soldiers and civilians and make them resettle. They will collect or import bombs and weapons and arm all Armenians. They will blame all revolts, revolutions, and massacres committed by the Armenians or on Muslims and publicize this in domestic and foreign public opinion. They will carry out espionage and provocations in favor of the Allied states. The points listed above show that the organizers and perpetrators of all events were Armenians. The Van uprising openly showed that the Armenians and the Ottoman army totally defected to the enemy or ran away to their places of the state weapons issued to them. These and numerous other facts prove that Armenians betrayed the government and served and helped the enemy. In this connection, American author Samuel Weems wrote that the civil war initiated by Armenian traders cost the Turks and Armenians dearly. Despite all the good intentions of the Ottoman government, tough action was taken as the situation was gradually deteriorating. The country was involved in a war with the strongest European countries, or many foreign uprisings were turning into total betrayal, and inevitably it became necessary to ensure security in the rear in order to prevent a massacre of hundreds of thousands of Muslims. The first action was the relevant order to close the revolutionary centers of Armenians involved in negative activities and to arrest their ringleaders, issued by the Ottoman Minister of Internal Affairs on 24 April 1915 and sent to 14 provinces and 10 districts. On that day, Minister Talat sent 2 orders to the commander of the Fourth Army to resettle some Armenians to the hills over their activities around Zeytun and Meres and to prepare military depots for Armenian inmates that would be sent to Ayash. In compliance with the aforesaid instructions from the Minister of Internal Affairs, in 2003, 145 Armenian militants, committee members and traders were arrested in Istanbul alone. The draft resolutions which Armenians are trying to force European parliaments to recognize as Genocide Day and the Genocide Anniversary, which they mark every year, are related to these arrests, not to their resettlement. The closure of the committees to arrests of ringleaders in some territories, terrorists worsened their situation even more. Armenians organized and armed themselves from cities to the smallest villages and increased their bloody activities following a number of foreign promises. German historian Erich Fegel wrote in his book, A Myth of Terror, Armenian fanatics were trying to instill absurd, utopian, and completely distorted ambitions about their independence in the conscientiousness of their communities. There is no doubt that these ambitions will not materialize for only one reason. Armenians have never formed a majority in any part of the Ottoman Empire. The extremists gradually became even more atrocious and terrorized both Muslims and Armenians in order to achieve their goals. After World War I began, they openly started the civil war. In order to ensure the security of the army on the one hand and the civilian population on the other, the Ottoman government was forced to adopt the decision to temporarily resettle people living in the conflict zone to safer areas as a final humanist way out. In order to ensure the security of the state, the proxy of the commander-in-chief, Enver Pasha, described to Minister of Internal Affairs Talat Pasha the resettlement measures which Russia had taken against Muslims in the Caucasus from April 1915 and would inevitably take inside the Ottoman state. Armenians have concentrated around Lake Van and in Van province in order to raise the revolt and revolution. We entered to resettle these people from there and destroy the nest of the revolt. According to information from the Third Army from 7 April, the Russians stripped naked the Muslim population within their borders and pushed them into Ottoman territory. In order to achieve this and other goals mentioned above, it's necessary to push Armenian inmates and their families in Russian territory or disperse them in various places in Anatolia. As a final result, the Ottoman government was forced to adopt the law on resettlement on 27 May 1915. This law was temporary and resulted from the existing military situation. The law envisaged sending those who spied and betrayed the Ottoman state away from the conflict zone in groups or individually. The resolution showed that the Armenians who were being resettled could also take their property and cattle with them. No such experience has ever been seen in the world. For example, after Japan attacked the USA in December 1941, Americans of Japanese origin living in the country's west coast were moved to temporary settlements. Specifically, President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Special Decision number 9006 and 19 February 1942 and ordered the resettlement of Americans of Japanese origin from military areas. Another example is that during the war, the Soviet government resettled Germans, Mexican, Turks, Chechens, Ingush, and many other peoples to distant areas for military considerations. Such numerous instances were common both in Christian and Muslim countries in the Middle Ages. A special gendarmerie detachment was allocated to case Kurdish militants who could attack Armenian settlers. Policy of resettlement appealed not just to Armenians but also to Greeks, other minorities, even to Muslims. In order to administer these affairs, the main resettlement departments were set up, along with civilian hospitals. Military hospitals were also taken away from the army and handed over to the Armenians. In some areas, Armenian settlers were given food from the warehouses of the Ottoman army. They were given the food of fighting soldiers. In general, up to 800,000 people comprised mainly of national minorities, and even Muslims were resettled to other parts of the country in an orderly manner under the 27 May 1915 law. Keeping silent about the other people who were resettled and saying that the resettled Armenians were subjected to genocide by the Turkish government, Western Armenian ideologists claimed that the Armenians had taken up arms to protect themselves from resettlement in order to justify the Armenians who took up arms against their own state and cooperated with the enemy. The Ottoman government was forced to take this action after hesitating for 9 or 10 months, after it realized that it had no choice, whereas the Bolshevik leadership of the Soviet government and the Stalin-Mikoyan group exiled hundreds of thousands of Chechens, Ingush, Mexican, Turks, and other Muslim peoples yet not engaged in negative activity and had not raised armed rewards and uprisings to the deserted, snow-covered areas of Siberia. American author Samuel Weems expressed the following attitude to the resettlement of the Armenians. While resettling the Armenians, the Ottoman proceeded only from the real threat to their army, and this was the only reason for the resettlement of the Armenians. There is not a single fact that would prove the opposite. We have already noted that the Armenians created false documents in order to prove this issue in a different way. This part of the genocide industry of the Armenians who are begging the Christian world for money. It must be noted that some of the 1,234,671 Armenians who lived in the Ottoman state moved to other countries themselves, or to former Ottoman provinces that gained their independence after the war, or to safer parts of Anatolia. This means that 300,000 Armenians of 1.5 million Armenians, as Armenians themselves claim, were not exterminated. American authors Jim McCarthy and Theo McCarthy wrote, "Did the genocide really happen?" While following the activities of the Ottomans, it's difficult to believe that there was no order about genocide. There were the tens of thousands of Armenians living in Istanbul and Izmir not subjected to genocide. The authors then summarized these events and clearly said that there was no genocide organized by the Turkish government in Eastern Anatolia. The Armenian author Margosyan also indirectly confirmed this idea. In his research into the situation of Ottoman Ottoman Armenians at the end of the 19th century, he drew the conclusion that in the provinces that were called Armenian provinces, there were only 800,000 Armenians. This allows us to draw an extremely interesting conclusion. Specifically, before the first Armenian genocide before 1915, the number of Armenians in this province they have increased by 100,000 at most. This nullifies the Armenians' claims that 1.5 million Armenians were exterminated. On the other hand, if so many Armenians were exterminated, then no Armenians would have remained on Turkish territory. In that case, who are the Armenians who were resettled and then returned home? Foreign authors and statesmen who visited Anatolia confirmed that genocide was carried out not against Armenians but against Turks. German General Bernsarit von Schellender wrote that the Turks, if you do not touch them, are the most kindly disposed people of the towards people of the other faces. I said that numerous printed statements, inflammatory booklets, army reports, explosive substances, and other things which were seized in Armenian populated areas had been prepared long in advance and directed, strengthened, and financed by Russia. Istanbul received timely information about an Armenian attempt on state officials and officers. Since all the Muslims who could hold arms in their hands had been drafted into the Turkish army, the Armenians could find it easy to carry out a terrible massacre against defenseless people, because not only did the Armenians engage the Eastern Army facing the Russians, they also wiped out the Muslim population in this area. The Armenian atrocities which I witnessed were much worse than the alleged Turkish atrocities. In order to maintain their link with the rear front, the Eastern Army intervened first. However, since the First Army, the Eastern Army was using all its forces against the Russian troops on the front line, and since the uprising was expanding and affecting even the remotest parts of Turkey, the gendarmerie was used to suppress the uprising. This was a very urgent issue because the army's sensitive link with the rear front was in danger. Thousands of Muslim people ran away for fear of Armenian oppression. In the face of this situation, the cabinet of ministers decided to declare Armenians dangerous for the state and send them away from border areas. Moreover, since the elite portrayed the resettlement of the Armenians as Turkish hostility against Christians from the very beginning, they avoided any tough actions and were right. The propaganda campaign started. Indeed, every foreign country believed all sorts of foolish things. Seeing that the Ottoman government was forced to take action in connection with the Armenian uprising, Armenian author Borean wrote, according to an order and plan from the Russian Defense Ministry, Dashnakstein took the following decision. As entering the later one of the Armenian volunteer detachments approached, when the Dashnakstein detachment will retreat into the mountains and raise a revolt. The program for the revolt was implemented in April 1915. The Catholicos said that the armed detachment 10,000 people started fighting. In this way, the Dashnakstein party could say that its duty before exploitative terrorist rule in its motherland. As you can see from this, when 10,000 people raised up behind the front line where it's going on and jeopardize their own existence, the state will force the political authorities and officials to find ways to apply fully the principle of the end justifies the means in such an important matter as the self-defense of the state in order to suppress the rebellion that was going on in the aforesaid areas. Would like to bring the attention of our readers an interesting idea from a book by the first Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia, Kochaz Nuni, most copies of which were later taken out of libraries and bookshops and destroyed by the Armenians themselves by entering agreements that would have such serious consequences. Special agents of the Transcaucasian ARP acted against the will of our superior government and the party's General Assembly. In the autumn of 1914, armed detachments of Armenian volunteers organized themselves and fought the Turks because they could not refrain from organizing themselves and fighting. This was a result of the inevitable single-minded psychology that the Armenian people had been developing for generations. They were bound to get such a mindset, and they did. There are no Armenians in the Armenian provinces of Turkey. The Turks knew what they were doing and have no reason to regret this now. In 1915, Russia, Britain, and the United States had a lot of agents in Eastern Anatolia. They did not have any proof that the Ottoman government had allegedly issued a resolution to massacre the Armenians. The Russians, British, Americans received information about such atrocities from the Catholicos to Ishmedzi. Investigating the fuss made by the Armenians to USA government and Army Captain Emory Niels and civilian authors Sutherland to Eastern Anatolia. These two were instructed to study the situation on the spot and collect conclusive evidence.